Thank you, everyone. I'm sure some of you are raring to ask your questions, your concerns about what you heard so far. So may I call in our speakers, Maria, Patricia, and Gemma, to come up the stage, and perhaps we'll open this to questions. Gemma, you can ask them anything except maybe their love lives. Okay. And feel free to take photos and post it on Move, diba? And then you can tag your friends who are not here, but who might want to share. And also, you can feel free to tweet your questions. But may we have the first question, if there's any? First question, or maybe insights, comments, and what we've heard so far. Could you stand up, please, and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'm Murphy Gopez from CAC, and I'm a third-year student. So I would just like to ask, being overexposed or super exposed to media and social media itself, have you encountered such ethical dilemmas concerning journalism or broadcasting itself? And if you encountered such one, could you tell us about it, and then what did you do after that dilemma? What kind of decision you made?
Okay, I think that's addressed to Maria. Okay, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, I have so many to tell you about. Well, let's start with something from CNN. The end of 32 years of Suharto happened in 1998, and that was 13 years ago, so that's how long it was. But there was one weekend where I saw 8 people beheaded in Kalimantan. It was ethnic violence between the Dayaks and the Maduris. And ethical dilemma. Do you tell their names? Do you tell people about their families? Do you pass judgment on whether it's a good or bad thing? Because, for example, this is where the headhunters of Borneo live, in that part where they believe that if you cut off their heads, eat their brains and their liver, that you'll gain the strength of your enemy. Is that belief any worse than my belief in God? You know, so there are always all those dilemmas that you face as a journalist when you're telling people stories. And you always have to, my thing always, I think, is that you have to be respectful of other beliefs. I'm studying Al-Qaeda, and what distinguishes Al-Qaeda from other groups is its absolute defiance and absolute intent to eradicate any other belief but its own. It says only Al-Qaeda's beliefs, only its brand of Islam is correct, and everybody else is wrong. And not just wrong, everyone else can die because of that. Sorry, my last thing on terrorism, I'll stop. But Abu Bakr Bashir echoes Osama bin Laden. He's the Indonesian leader of JI. Jamaat Islamiyah, which is Al-Qaeda's arm in Southeast Asia, he said, between us and them, there will forever be a river of hatred. The same exact thing bin Laden said. Why is this important? Because when people have different views, your automatic assumption is to attack. And I think that when you tell people stories and are respectful of it, of their views, you actually help change both people's minds and the world around you. So respect is a key component of counterterrorism. I'll give you one last example of something that's much closer to home, and it's ironic to me because the coverage was just nominated for an Emmy. The bus hostage crisis. You all are very familiar with that. And again, I apologize, but my most recent experience is with ABS-CBN, and it taught me a lot about Filipino culture. And so I'll draw on that. Last year, in November, 8 people died because I think of our own incompetence. We had people in the police and in the PNP who could have handled that crisis. For whatever reason, they weren't there. These people died, right? If you're the one covering the event, reporting the event, Do you keep the cameras rolling? It's a nice academic idea. We faced it on the ground. And we made the call that yes, we will roll, and I'll tell you why. It was because when the day started, it was the police and the government which actually asked us to go live on the scene. You wanted to know. And when it went crazy, when that moment when the brother was interviewed, we didn't know what was happening. No one had a bird's eye view. And normally, the crisis manager for the government has that bird's eye view, and they will pick up the phone and call the heads of news. This is what's happened in the past. In this instance, it didn't happen. Did we go through soul searching? Did we do the right thing in that? Yes, intense soul searching, and yes, I think we did the right thing, and I will tell you why again. The London riots. When people died during the London riots, did anyone ask BBC or CNN to stop the coverage of the London riots? No one did, and they caught some of the deaths on air. My point here is media, journalists, you as citizen journalists, are often observers. We're only observers. We show what the actors are doing. If the actors are incompetent, that's a problem. We need to ask people to make them more competent. But it is not our call to change reality, nor can we necessarily act on it. In that situation, a quick answer is, I use that also because that was a time when the wisdom of crowds also turned into a lynch mob. You know, that evening, after the deaths happened, President Aquino went on a midnight press conference, and he actually was asked, is anyone to blame? He said, no, the police is not to blame. But he did say some members of media are to blame. And it unleashed the floodgates of social media on any journalist who was on social media. So many of us, I in particular, spent 3 hours that night answering every person's concern. Why did we do it? I want to tell you why. I think that's one of the problems of social media. It can be the wisdom of crowds. It can be a lynch mob. And one of the things that you need to do now is to understand the processes that you are now going to be in charge of policing. Thanks.
I think taking off from that, Maria, I'd like to situate it in a more local experience about social media abuse. I'm sure the campus has had its own experiences regarding the downside of social media use. And in other media companies, for example, they would have a set of guidelines on how to use social media. I'm not sure if the university has or student organizations have, but I think it's a day-to-day question and a day-to-day concern for them. Like the Christopher Lau cyberbullying, remember that poor Ateneo boy who actually wanted to be informed that there was flood before he could navigate his car, and who was a subject of really intense online bullying. What can you say about that?
Here's, again, the negative side. Every tool can be used positively or negatively. And in this poor boy, try not to be mean on social media. You know, my actual, the advice I always give and I use myself is I try to behave on social media the way I behave in real life. You know, I actually find Filipinos, it's like everyone lets loose on social media, diba? But in the end, that makes for a very vicious discussion. And then your question then is, what are we doing this for? So actually look at it. I met vaults through social media. I expanded my world. Several of the movers I hired because I met them on Twitter. You know, your social media expands your world. It's incredible. You can actually be in touch with people. I ask authors, Nobel laureates questions, and they answer. That's an incredible tool. And you're Pat Evangelista. You know, Pat said, but you're Maria Ressa. We are all equal on social media. Build your reputation. That's my other thing. So I think you have to be prepared that when you go on social media, people can be mean and they can be nasty. You have to have the guts to actually deal with it. Don't back down. You know, don't fight. Treat them the way you would treat them in real life if it happened. Social media is only an extension of the real world. Behave there as you would in the real world.